when the task spilled over into undeath. He stopped calling it his life's work. His mind whirled with great plans, never thinking of what might happen were he to succeed. Ad Nauseam is a combo deck where you must cheat death to seal the fate of your opponent. A contender of old, the deck faded away with the rise of Meddling Mage and Thalia. But now, as the human deck seems to be in decline, the time is just right to spring forth this old combo once again. This deck involves a complicated combo with the ability to go off at instant speed. Finding and defending our combo pieces is the single-minded focus of this deck. Let's look at the combo and see what makes it work. Remember, this is a deck that takes advantage of how flimsy the rules of Magic are about the difference of damage and loss of life. It can leave opponents' heads spinning as they try to comprehend the exact interactions of your masterwork. Let's take a look. Ad Nauseam is a black instant for 3 and 2 black that allows us to reveal the top card of our deck and lose life equal to its cost to add it to our hand, with the key phrase being to lose life, not take damage and not pay life. We may repeat the process as many times as we like, which is good, because if we played an Angel's Grace earlier in the turn, we cannot lose the game for having a negative life total, allowing us to put our entire deck into our hand after revealing it all to our opponent. Similarly, if we cast Ad Nauseam while we control a Phyrexian Unlife, we can put ourselves into the negatives as we are losing life and not taking damage, which means the perfection of Phyrexia without all those pesky poison counters. Once we have our entire deck in our hand, how do we win? Well, with a giant burn spell, of course. Lightning Storm costs 1 and 2 red, which we will always have since our deck contains 4 copies of Simian's Spirit Guide. Lightning Storm deals 3 damage to any target, and either player may discard a land to add 2 damage and change the target. Which means with 9 lands, we can deal 21 points of damage right to our opponent's previously beautiful face. Your opponent can also discard cards to activate this ability in an attempt to turn it around on us. But because we've just drawn our entire deck, we are almost guaranteed to have more lands in hand. Nice try, opponents. An important note when you cast Lightning Storm: you must express to your opponent that you are holding priority. And in so doing, it means your opponent will have a chance to respond, but only after you discard enough lands to be lethal. If you do not do this, your opponent can simply pass their priority, and the spell will resolve dealing only 3 damage. So remember, it's critical that you express that you are holding priority. Another way to win post-board involves the Laboratory Maniac in our sideboard and requires you to go off sorcery speed and with an extra land drop. In that situation, simply cast your Laboratory Maniac and then a Serum Visions to try and draw from the empty deck. So that is the combo, and now that we are in the know, let us discuss how we intend to find and cast it. We'll start with Acceleration. The cheapest cost to go off in this deck is 6 mana, and we aim to do so by turn 3, or perhaps 4. Lotus Bloom is an artifact we can't actually cast, but we can suspend for 3 turns at the low cost of 0 mana. In just 3 short turns of setup, we can have our very own Black Lotus, which will ensure us the mana to go off when it comes out of suspend on turn 4. Just set it and forget it. Pentad Prism is an artifact for 2 that gets a counter for each color paid into it. Remove that counter for a mana. This on turn 2 or 3 allows our liftoff on turn 4, but all of this acceleration doesn't help if we can't find our combo pieces as we move on to the dig. 4 copies of Serum Visions are the star here, as the Scry 2, after the draw, digs us deeper than the format standard opt. That also allows us to hide key cards until we need them, which is important as our hand isn't the safest place for cards, and if we lose our Lightning Storm in Game 1, well, it's game over. Sleight of Hand gets us just as deep as an Opt would, but it lets us see both options at the same time. Peer Through Depths is a real all-star here, as both Ad Nauseam and Angel's Grace can be found with it during our opponent's end step. And let's not forget the 5 Scry lands we are playing just get us that much closer to the cards we need. There is an argument for builds with Spoils of the Vault, making sure we find the card we name. But since this card exiles a chunk of our library, and we need the lands and spirit guides to win in the end, I just found it to be too risky overall. Instead of spoils, we need to focus on how we plan to protect this game plan. Protection is vital, as the major weakness of this deck is its hand. A pair of Thoughtseize or an early Thought-Knot Seer can rip all of our plans to shreds. Thankfully, Ad Nauseam itself can't be taken by Inquisition, but that doesn't mean it's safe. In order to hedge our bets against this hand disruption, we run 2 main deck Leyline of Sanctity. That's right, main deck. If they show up, they can drastically turn an abysmal match up to one where we can't lose. After that, we have 3, count them 3, Pact of Negation. This card will protect the combo when we go off, and there's no need to worry about that payment if we are winning the turn we cast it. If your opponent threatens to resolve anything that would decidedly lose us the game, we can always pact it, even without 5 mana next turn. Simply put the trigger on the stack in your upkeep, and then use Angel's Grace, and you're not going to lose the game. Debts have been paid. Hey, if it's turn 4, you might even be able to cast an Ad Nauseam and just win outright. And while Phyrexian Unlife does a great Grace impression, it won't stop you from losing to a Pact trigger, so keep that in mind. Also, since we are talking about the Unlife, it interacts so well against Burn and other aggro decks. Remember that you won't take any poison counters until you are first at 0 life, which means that if we are at 4 life and get attacked by 3 Goblin Guides and a Swift Spear, we will not have 3 infect. We will first go to -3, and then any damage done to us would give us infect counters. Pretty spiffy, huh? Finally, the deck is going to round things out with a single Slaughter Pact to answer any annoying non-black creature our opponent might have. It also lets us have an out to spell Skyder, Shali, when we draw our whole deck. Now let's take a look at this deck's mana base, which is quite distinct. The mana base starts with 4 copies each of Gemstone Mines and City of Brass. After all, we are running a lot of different colors and costs in the deck, and need to always have the right mana for the job. Also, an interesting note about City of Brass over Mana Confluence: there will be times when we will need to make mana while having negative life, which is undoable with the Confluence as it requires a payment of life. City of Brass, on the other hand, deals damage to us, so it keeps tapping well after our life has run dry. In odd instances, you will need to make City of Brass mana when doing so would either kill us outright or give us the last poison counter to end us. The city has 2 separate abilities, so we can make a mana and place the ability to damage us on the stack and then go off at instant speed. As long as we kill our opponent before we allow the stack to fully resolve, we can float the lethal point of damage instead of taking it outright. Moving on to the rest of the mana base, we have the 5 Scry lands with 3 Temple of Enlightenment and 2 Temple of Deceit to help us dig early game, and 5 fast lands in the form of 3 Seachrome Coast and 2 Darkslick Shores. To make sure, pun intended, the most important 3rd land drop is made untapped. An island and a plains end out our lands, so we have search targets for Assassin's Trophy as well as Field of Ruin. So what does the sideboard of Ad Nauseam look like these days? Our board has a lot of options for different situations and really allows the games 2 and 3 with this deck to turn into a sub-game of outguessing your opponents. If you're worried about Duress and Surgical, just take out 1 Ad Nauseam and a Peer to add 2 Fae of Wishes. which really opens up your board to a slew of situational cards, all while hiding a combo piece far from your opponent. If you think your opponent might not have much removal for creatures, bring in some Grave Titans and power them out with your Blooms and Prisms. Control got you down? Thankfully, Grace is already split second, so Boseiju will shelter your Ad Nauseam from any opposing counter magic. And Duress and Silence can be used to make sure you are free to combo without interruptions. Hercules is a sure way to send any Urza player spiraling backwards, as even the food tokens get sent away. Speaking of Urza himself, that's one of the better matchups of this deck, as we can still win after they go off so long as we have brought in Laboratory Maniac. The two other copies of Leyline make sure that green-black X decks stay out of our head and can ruin the days of some Scapeshift players. Disenchant and Patrician's Scorn allow us to beat other Leyline decks. Scorn will even be free while we go off if we can cast an Angel's Grace that turn. Fatal Push and Path to Exile round out the board with some spot removal for problematic creatures while keeping the names of our removal diverse just in case we run into the dreaded humans matchup. I'm really glad to see Ad Nauseam returning to the modern meta. You should look into playing this deck if you like the idea of using your life as the ultimate resource and want to play a slightly more resilient and slippery combo deck that has multiple ways to accomplish the same combo. Enjoy playing around with transformative and toolbox sideboard options like transforming to a ramp deck or becoming a wish board. If you end up playing against this deck, you should try and abuse the weakness of its hand, and always remember that the whole deck can go off at instant speed, so watch out for tapping out on the end step. I hope very much this video has been of some help to you. Special thanks to guest author Ricky of Door Monster, who served as a professional consultant to this deck. I actually got to work with Ricky and the rest of Door Monster over on their channel, guesting on this Magic the Gathering themed video, which I'll link in the description if you'd like to go check out and have a chuckle. Thanks also goes out to our editor, Patrick Lickman, who's certainly had their hands full with some of the combos demonstrated here. What deck would you like to see a tech on next? Let me know in the comments below.